Good morning, everyone. As you find your seats, please feel free to sit in the middle of the room. It's a bit of a fire hazard if we have too many people along the wall, so definitely come join us in the middle section. That being said, good morning, and I hope you are enjoying the 2020 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. My name is Lindsay Solitar, and I'm a first-year student at MIT Sloan, and it's my pleasure to introduce our panel, Innovating for the Next Generation of America's Pastime. On our panel today, we have Greg Kane, who's Vice President of Baseball Data at MLB, Caleb Weinstein, who's Director for Sport, Media, and Entertainment at Google Cloud, Lou DiPaoli, who is EVP and Chief Revenue Officer of the New York Mets, Jason Getke, who is Chief Technology Officer at MLB, and our panel will be moderated by Christina Douglas, who is Senior Deputy Editor at ESPN. The panel will run for 45 minutes, and then we will leave 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. If you have a question, we ask that you submit it via Twitter using the hashtag BaseballInnovation. If you forget the hashtag, it is also, it was on the slide. And the comments or questions with the top mentions will be selected by our moderator. And with that, I will turn it over to Christina.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Thanks for coming, guys. It's so wonderful to see all of you here. It's an exciting time for baseball. We're 3 weeks out from opening day. I know I'm excited. We're all excited. So in addition to that, though, there was a really big announcement this week. And so that's why we're here. We're here to talk about the new partnership between Google Cloud and MLB. And so I wanted to start with, can you please explain to us what you did this week? And we'll go from there.
Sure. First of all, thanks for the opportunity. We're all excited to be here and share some stories as we get ready for the new season. It's been a really busy off-season for us. The off-season is often a busy time as we try to take on major projects and upgrade our infrastructure. This year, Google's been a major part of that process. So stepping back a little bit, the last 3 years have been a time of sort of dynamic change and renewal for technology at baseball. About 3 years ago, Disney completed a large acquisition of our core technology platform and our team, the BAMTech deal, that's now powering ESPN Plus and also Disney Plus, and this scaled up and had a lot of success. We're really happy for the team that went over there to Disney. It left us pretty depleted on the technology side. Much of the staff that was supporting technology at MLB went with that deal. Greg and his team thankfully stayed with us as a group that was focused on baseball. And we spent the last 3 years sort of teasing out the components of the platform that were baseball specific, that we could retain and build around, like the tracking platform, like the replay system, the back office system that manages contracts and things like that, and also our consumer products, and also rebuilding the organization. So it was a big lift. It was also an opportunity for us to think strategically about the technology partners that we chose and the platform that was going to come out of this that we were building on. So after a pretty extensive evaluation of various cloud providers, including AWS and Oracle and Teradata, who we also have relationships with, we made the decision to go from a multi-cloud strategy to a single cloud with Google. And we're building all of our core infrastructure on the Google platform going forward. So Caleb is here from the Google Cloud team. He's been a great partner over the past year or so as we've ramped up that partnership. We're already deployed with a number of critical systems, our content management platform, our subscriber management platform for like MLB TV and our mobile apps, all of our commerce and entitlements for paid products like MLB TV are running on Google Cloud. And then over this off-season, we also migrated a number of systems like our business analytics platform called Wheelhouse, which Lou's going to speak to a little bit, onto that platform, onto BigQuery as well. So we've got all of our data in one place. So you can think of it as sort of a many-to-one consolidation, simplification. In this first phase of the project, it's about setting that foundation, making sure that it's rock solid and ready for the new season as we get started. But what we're most excited about is the opportunities that come next, building on top of that platform and being able to use some of the advanced Google technology around machine learning and handling huge data sets and things of that nature.
Caleb, this is really unique, right? There's no other sport league. There's nothing else doing this. Can you tell us a little bit about why and how and why this
Absolutely. I think, first, thank you for having us. We're really excited to be here, and we're really excited about the partnership with MLB. As Jason touched on, it covers everything from play and performance data that Greg focuses on, to the enterprise, to the video. Every aspect of how the league is really managing the game is now running on the capabilities of Google Cloud. For us, we really, I spent a lot of time talking to leagues and teams and associations about developing that unified data plane, connecting your performance data to your fan data, really, I would say, driving the experience overall and looking at the business that every fan is a customer, a subscriber, engaging and using a unified data plane to engage them in a deeper way.
So the tracking component is a huge, huge part of this. So why don't we start there? Can we start with StatCast? And
Sure.
what this means for StatCast?
Right, so just kind of like rewind a little bit and just kind of talk through the history of what is now StatCast. But back in 2007, we started tracking pitches across every game in the league. That was just the pitch back at that stage. And then in 2015, we launched the next generation StatCast platform. And each of these iterations, we learn more and more about what technology is capable of doing, but also what we can what we want to get out of that data as we're able to advance the technology. And then in the last generation of StatCast, we were able to, we were really amazed at what we could get out of a single radar panel that was behind home plate, and we're able to get nearly everything. There were some known limitations on the system, and we squeezed as much juice out of that system as we could. But now with all the lessons that we learned from the previous system, we're now working with a partner in Hawkeye to build a multi-camera system that has multiple redundancy and has all kinds of things in it that are based on the lessons that we learned over the last several years, last 5 to 10 years of work on this space. And this next generation system really takes us to the next generation and is able to, provide, 19-point limb tracking data, things that were not possible in the previous system that we're able to gather here now. The key challenge in these transitions, though, is you have a corpus of knowledge about how a system works that the entire industry has. And, we have a radar technology that was tracking the ball and machine vision that was tracking the players historically. Now we're moving to a completely machine vision system, backing into all the different elements that we're providing to all the clubs and to third parties and to broadcasters, making sure it's still consistent and we maintain that same baseline. We're spending a lot of time right now working through that to make sure that we can provide that same level of service. But once we get through that part, with all the limb tracking data, the complete coverage in the field, we're tracking every single throw that's on the field now, including like tosses into the stands, which we need to filter out so that in our consumer products, they're not part of the game itself, but it's just one of the items that we have to work through as we continue to expand the system. So now that we have these capabilities in hand, we're able to work with partners like Google to start, doing more extraction of this data based on where we know we wanted to go, but we're not able to do based on not be able to track, 100% of throws on the field or, various elements like that. So once we have this new plane now that we have all of the data for everything that happens, we can start extending things like infield outs above average and all these different other elements with all the data from every single throw of every single play of every single game. That's really powerful once we can get to that level.
So you've described this as a full rebuild, a generational refresh, essentially that you have solved object tracking. That's a really big deal. So now where do we go from here? What are some of the aspirational things that we can talk about and think about?
Sure. So, one of the key elements that kind of for the league itself, one of the really interesting things we're able to do with all this data, now that we have the tracking, we have all these elements, we know exactly when a pitch happens, we know when the end of the play is. So automatically right now and over the last several years, we've been clipping the video from every single game for both the home and away broadcast so we can provide that to the clubs for baseball operation uses. But just yesterday, we launched a new platform for video search that exposes all of the video from every single pitch going back to 2018. But it's also bringing in the search for all the metadata of all the other editorial content that's there as well. So, again, working with Google on the search side, able to solve that problem and expose all this content has been a very interesting development out of this. And then to take that even further as we kind of develop more machine learning models to do a recommendation engine around the types of video that you as a consumer might want to see. That's another really powerful element where we can start get more engagement with the fans to see, expose all this like large corpus of content that we have that, was always present, but the way that you could access it before was more difficult. And now through this next generation platform that we're building on now, we're able to really extend that.
I know we weren't supposed to go here very fast, but I think we're already here. Can we please talk about robot umps for a second? Because this plays into that, and you're already testing in spring training, and that's a very exciting part of this, at least for me as well. So
Sure. So the advances in the tracking technology that Greg just described in summary, and Greg and I sort of live and breathe this stuff every day. We love it. That's why we're talking so fast. We have made some really significant improvements in the accuracy of ball tracking just in the last 2 years. And we can quantify this. We quantify everything in this space. The margin of error on our ball tracking accuracy just a couple of years ago was on the order of an inch or more. And that's okay for entertainment purposes when you're plotting a pitch on broadcast TV. It's nice to have the live strike zone in real time, showing where the pitch crossed the plate, but it's not good enough, or it doesn't measure up well against expert human umpires. Human umpires are very, very accurate in their calling of balls and strikes. When we improve the accuracy of the tracking system down to the level of a quarter of an inch or a tenth of an inch, you start to get to the limits, of tracking, and there you can do a lot of things in an automated way. So not only are you taking the trajectory of the ball and its location as it crosses the plate, but you can intersect that with the 3D volume of the strike zone, and you can do that in real time. And that's what we've been testing for the past year or so in various lower level baseball leagues. We started with the Atlantic League to just sort of smoke test the system and make sure that the core ball tracking and ball strike calling and the signaling back to the umpires actually wear an earpiece that tells them if there was a ball or a strike. And the latency on that call has to be hundreds of milliseconds, like 200 milliseconds, in order to not be awkward and sort of disrupt the pace of the game. So we had some successful testing there. I would say that the response we got in that Atlantic League testing sort of exceeded our expectations. Not only did the technology work, but people around the game really embraced it. I mean, they were excited about the fact that this was going to improve accuracy of the strike zone. So the next step is to take it to minor leagues, and we're testing this year in the Florida State League, which is a lower level minor league system. The reason we chose Florida State is it maximized the amount of baseball that we could test with. These parks that we're deploying into host major league spring training and also the minor league regular season. We're not testing in live games at the spring training level with MLB players and umpires, but we're demonstrating the technology there for them. And then once the minor league season starts, we'll be able to actually use this in calling live games. We anticipate that testing will continue at higher level minor leagues and eventually be ready for major league deployment. But there's a lot of stakeholders here. There's a lot of policy considerations and other sort of league issues that need to be navigated and negotiated. What we're excited about is the technology is maturing to the point that it's enabling those conversations. We think it's going to be a big change in the game. So when we talk about robot umpires, there's no robots, but there will be technology augmentation of the existing umpires, through the earpieces and the real-time feedback. And the umpires are still going to play a really important role in managing the game and making human judgment calls about enforcing the rest of the rule book. So it's really about that specific ball crossing the strike zone, intersecting with the strike zone problem that we're trying to solve there.
I really appreciate you humoring me and going through all of that. Lou, this is obviously a big deal for teams.
Yep.
This unified data plane and everything being in place and all teams having access to it. How do you plan to use some of this new data that you will have access to reach fans in the in-park experience?
Sure. So, obviously, as the non-tech person up here, I'm going to be the first one to admit that. I'm going to be looking at things from how we engage a fan using these type of enhancements. So obviously on the baseball side, our baseball operations department can take some of this granular data down to the 1/10 of an inch or under tracking to get better analysis on how our team performance is going. But from a business, how can fans utilize this and engage with it? So the idea here and the whole platform is really to help drive future fan engagement. You want more and more fan engagement. So if I can give an example, hopefully you guys, I think we talked about this on our call a couple weeks ago. You're going to be able at some point, I'm going to tout one of our own players, of course, here, Jacob deGrom, who's won the last 2 National League Cy Young Awards. If you want to slice and dice his data to see exactly every single 0-2 pitch that he threw, going back to 2018, you can pull that up instantaneously, and it'll be there for you to digest on your own. That's fantastic. because you haven't been able to do that. Right now, you might be able to go online and look at old archive footage of a game, search for it yourself. It's rather laborious. And for those who know, baseball fans are very engaged in stats and looking at numbers and looking at video and looking at the history of the game. So if you can pull up this data, this is going to help you become more engaged as a fan. And then what that hopefully evolves into, from our standpoint at the team level, is how do we take that level of engagement and get further monetization of that fan in our ballpark or on TV. So really, we're excited by all of this. This is fantastic, and kudos to everybody here for making it happen.
So Luke, what does that potentially look like? I know you've already experimented in park. Obviously, there are promotions, there are other things, but what are some of the things you're playing around with?
There's a lot you can do, because again, our job is to make sure that we're trying to balance, the in-park experience versus the TV experience. And obviously, if people are sitting at home using the MLB app, that's great. But, we need to make sure that we're getting people in the park. So we have to ensure that the experience at Citi Field or at Fenway or whatever ballpark isn't inferior. So a couple of things that we did last year is we were one of the first teams to introduce some advanced stats on our video board. So the main center field scoreboard literally listed hot zones. Made something simple, right? But it showed hot zones of the player at bat. Now, one of the first teams who came in, the visiting team, didn't like it because they thought we were giving an advantage to our catcher to know that, hey, Caleb hits 72% of his, hits to the third base side. If we have to honestly think that that's going to help our catcher focus and give the signals to our pitching staff, they're way behind the times. But the fans liked it because we got a lot of positive feedback to say, that's really cool. And then we started rolling out more advanced stats during the games up on the board, just silently, didn't advertise it, didn't push it. But then fans were like, that's really cool. I didn't know that. Because if I'm in the park and I'm using the MLB app, which I sit there and watch people using while watching the game live, I have access to that data. So as a team, why don't we utilize that to further engage fans while they're in the park? Because you've made the commitment to come to the ballpark, I have to make sure that my experience isn't going to be any less.
Right.
Those are great examples. Some other sort of front office or business analytics examples that we've heard around the league are being able to take the entire universe of baseball fans and sort of segment them and understand them as individual cohorts, rather than just coarse grained season ticket holders, individual, game sales, being able to target millennials that might be interested in a monthly subscription, like a Netflix subscription, that gives you access to the stadium on a fixed price, more affordable, more of a social experience. Many venues are moving to sort of standing room only bar experiences, like outfield bars, where you can go and socialize with your friends, and giving you an all access pass, to that for a month, is a different way of thinking about a baseball game. It's sort of a communal social experience with baseball in the background, which is kind of nice. Other things that we're thinking about going forward are loyalty, targeted offers, promotions like that. The more you engage, the more the benefits accrue to you, the more we learn about you, that sort of thing. So all this is enabled by collecting data and really understanding how fans are engaging with the game, coming to games, buying merchandise and concessions, engaging our digital products, sharing content on those platforms. We aggregate all that data into a platform that we call Wheelhouse, and we use it at the league level to understand our fan base and to take care of them better, to serve them better. We also share that data with the clubs, and then the clubs mash up their own data from local merchandising and point of sale logs and things like that. So all of that fan data is now running on BigQuery. It was running on a different data warehouse in the past. We made the move this offseason to BigQuery, and what we're finding is a lot of the stakeholders that use that data are really happy that we're on that platform, because they've already been on BigQuery and on Google Ad Manager and other platforms for marketing purposes. So now they have a single unified data set that they can run queries against and do that kind of segmentation and targeting. So when Caleb mentioned one data plane, that's really what we're talking about, is like having one big space, a big data lake that we're able to slice and analyze and segment on the Google platform.
And I was just going to add that, we have a host of tools. Basically, what we are is we're the engine to all this analysis. We have over 30 data management products. We also, as Jason mentioned, we have the Google Marketing Platform, which goes out and looks at the broader universe and relates that to the core data that Lou will have on his ticket holders, his season ticket holders, and everybody coming through the park. And that, I think that's why we're so excited to be working with MLB, because it's not only rich in the play and the performance data, it's also, let's be honest, it's a long season, it's 160 games, I think, millions and millions of people coming into these parks. It offers us a great sandbox to be helping them to structure this data, where we see people are typically spending 70% of their time just structuring the data, and our goal is to get that down to 30, 20, 10, so then we can start to innovate off of that structured data.
So Caleb, what else can you take from other learnings? Obviously, you don't just work with MLB, you work with Google, you have a very interesting career path, but what have you learned along the way that baseball can use and really pull from within those wide range of tools?
So, I think there are a couple of really interesting things going on with MLB that we've done with other people. We have a multi-year relationship with the NCAA where we took 80 years of stats and we've used that to actually do prediction analytics. And we've done it in limited ways around the Final Four, but really to look back and say what was the humidity of that day, if it's raining, even if it's just hot, how is that team going to perform versus another team? And I think, what we like about StatCast is there are developments going on in StatCast that can show that contextualization that Lou's talking about to bring that, that story, I think, to life. And really, I think the goal that we're trying to enable is this deep, engaging experience that's beyond the live, that basically makes that fan appreciate that sport, and baseball in this sense, 365 days a year, and even if their team has not played that night, they can go back and they can find the data, enjoy the data in a very easy, frictionless manner.
And I think something that's interesting, there's also there's the fan engagement side or the fan analytics side, but there's the baseball operations analytics side, which a similar model, but right now we deliver all of our data through a suite of APIs that we have. This model that we have for the fan analytics side, we're going to replicate that same model for how we deliver data to the baseball operations group at every club. Because they need a very similar way to slice and dice this data in a way that we can deliver to them, and Google's platform allows us to do so.
As the guy who tries to keep things simple, right? That's kind of my job here. I'm the simple guy up here. The beauty of Wheelhouse for us, for those who may not understand. So previous to Wheelhouse, going back just a couple of years ago, the Mets or any other team only had certain amount of information on their fans. I would know if you bought tickets. I might know if you bought concessions, potentially. I might know if you interacted with us on a fan club or a kids club. I didn't know that if you bought the MLB app. I didn't know that if you subscribed to MLB TV. I didn't know if you bought something online with merchandise from MLB Shop or for that. So all of a sudden, if I'm going to try to build, or our team is going to try to build a scoring model of a fan, right? You're trying to look at the lifetime value of a fan. I don't have all the data. I only know what I know. And that was very limited to just basically ticket purchasing data was most of what we had. Now, we can completely take a look at a much more of a 360-degree view of this fan to help us when we run that through a scoring model to decide, what type of a fan is that person and how do we approach them. We know how to segment offers to them, where before it was just kind of buckshot, give it a chance, and let's see how the best we can do, as smart as we could. But this definitely helps us be much more efficient, and it's great that the league has taken initiatives to help us all be a lot smarter and more effective.
That's a great entry into Firebase. We have specifically technology for mobile messaging that can take all this data that Lou's talking about and literally could text the people sitting in one section versus another, somebody who's been there for 3 games. It's that way to move the data around that you can really engage with them on a new level.
Right. That's perfect.
Personalization seems to be at the heart, really, of all of this when it comes to fans. How are you also seeing in terms of the video components? That was something we spoke a lot about earlier, and that, Greg, you hinted at. There's a lot going on there in terms of taking 3-hour game, making it smaller, delivering
Right.
that. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, we've been studying this very deeply, as you might expect, but one of the interesting takeaways that we found is that, most of the way that we were serving up content was the most viewed content that we actually had on our platform. So even understanding how to build a machine learning element to personalize how I'm putting video in front of you, I need to get data on actually how you're interacting with a large corpus of data, because all we're really putting in front of you is what we've kind of editorialized already. So, we're launching that platform very soon, but what it's going to allow us to do is, take all, if we know that you're a Yankees fan, maybe we'll show you more Yankees content, but then also as we kind of continue to iterate on that. Sorry, if you're a Mets fan.
I think you said Mets fan. Go ahead.
If you're a Mets fan, then we're going to show you lots of Jacob deGrom highlights. So, but as we kind of, that's kind of the whole point of this, where as we get more data, we're able to build a better model, understand more with the other data points that we have to then figure out what type of content you want to see. And then, in some cases, it's going to be unexpected, what you might want to see, and then that'll continue to build that out. So that's going to be really exciting as we put that out in front of everyone. So,
Full disclosure, Greg might be a Yankees fan.
But for the league office, you root for nobody, right? You're just neutral.
I'm an MLB employee.
There you go. Love the show.
So just to elaborate on that, Greg has already sort of painted this picture, but it's worth kind of rehashing again. To your point about the 3-hour games, baseball is a big time commitment. It was sort of created at a time where maybe time wasn't such a precious commodity. There weren't so many competing, influences on our time. To watch a full season of baseball, it's 3 hours a night, 162 games a year before the postseason, and that's a huge amount of time, that we're asking from our fans. Of course, we have nightly recaps and highlights and sports shows and so forth that you can catch up the next morning on the most impressive home runs and so forth. But if you have other interests in the game, maybe you're a fan of a particular player, maybe you have a fantasy lineup that's sort of unique to you, or the league that you're playing with, it's harder to get the content in that form. And so one of the things we're doing is taking 3-hour games, carving them up into individual plays, not just the home runs and the double plays, but every play, every strikeout, every walk, every hit by pitch, whatever, is now going to be a video clip. And we do that using the automated scoring and tracking events that we built for the tracking system, and then an automated video cutter. And what it does is create this huge corpus of videos. The first time you see it, you're like, this is amazing. I'm like in baseball heaven. And then 10 minutes later, you're like, and I'm drowning, and I can't find my way through this. So you have to build some tools, right? The first tool is search. And fortunately, we have a lot of really rich metadata around these games. Maybe two-strike counts or particular matchups or game scenarios or whatever. And you can do parameterized search and pull up all those plays, and that's really cool. Recommendations is even more convenient. So either you specify what you're interested in, the favorite player or your fantasy roster or whatever, or we just infer that, from your engagement, with the product. The more you engage, the more it tailors to you. E-commerce companies have been doing for a decade now, but applying it to this particular type of content. And then finally, a social element of being able to take that content and share it within your social network, with your friends. It creates completely new kind of navigation paths through the game, new ways of engaging the game, not linearly, from start to finish for 3 hours, but, in smaller chunks that are personalized to you. And again, the underlying technology here is powered by, the strength of the Google platform. TensorFlow is an important strategic technology for us as we apply machine learning. And this is a whole separate topic. We could talk about machine learning as it relates to baseball analytics, as it relates to business analytics, as it relates to personalization. But that's just the tip of what we're doing in the personalization space.
Just how fine can you slice and dice that video?
To a frame.
Anything that you can define. So anything that we have data on. So rainy days with 0-2 counts that are curveballs that hit by pitch, or that type of thing. I mean, any way that you want to do. Plus, on top of that, the corpus of the entire history of editorial content too. So all the videos that have hot dogs in them, or squirrels, or things of that nature as well. So it's all available, it's all there. And it's one of those things, we had all this data, we had all this video historically, but it's, in hindsight, it was like, why didn't we build this sooner? It's kind of a, obviously we've had some other technology efforts that we've been looking at, but now that we're able to do this, you can really do anything that you want with it.
This is also democratization of this technology. We've had this capability for a while for our editors and journalists, and that's how they produce their stories. But we're basically taking that engine and productizing it.
was going to say, I really love that you're tracking hot dogs.
Right.
That's fantastic. But so
too.
how do you, I mean, right?
Yeah.
But how do you anticipate fans using it? As you said, though, I mean, it's so much. Like, I don't know to search for a hot dog on a rainy day.
Sure.
So what do you really think that a fan is going to do with it? What's a team going to do with it? Like, how are we going to see this work?
Well, I mean, as I've been using it, I've just kind of fall into it and just start looking at things I think of just randomly. You know, as Jason was saying, you know, you kind of get lost, like, okay, what's next? And you just kind of
Right.
start cascading to different areas that you want to look at. You know, the way that we can split the data is for very specific cases. So if you're a fan out there that really wants to dial into Ohtani's strikeouts, for example, you know, a good story around that as well, kind of on the, you know, inside our editorial staff, you know, historically, if we wanted to give all of the strikeout pitches that Ohtani threw in a game, it would take the editorial staff several hours to go through and find those pitches, find those clips, make those clips. But now with this new platform that we have, it takes about 20 seconds to just hit those different queries that you'd like to do, and then they can generate a reel of all the videos, aggregate that together, and they can deliver that. It's been a really big efficiency for our editorial staff to, you know, for example, foreign media that wants to have all of the, you know, the Korean media that would like to see all of the Korean at-bats, Korean pitchers in play for the whole of the game. You know, that was a day, full day process to do, and now we can instantaneously, as soon as the day is over, we send an email out, and then it's there in their inbox so they can have it. So it really has kind of changed what we were able to do internally.
And the answer is different for everybody, you know, based on your own personalized interest. I'm a Rockies fan. I live and work in Colorado. Trevor Story is my favorite player. So every time we do a release, I search for Trevor Story home runs, see them all come up. Yep, we're good. Let's launch this.
But I mean, I think the key to it is there's so much data and there's so much ability to slice and dice this up for fans that if that helps someone who maybe says, I can't watch a whole 3-hour game, but I'm going to turn around and I'm going to slice and dice Trevor Story videos, but you're still an engaged fan. Like at some point we have to take that level of engagement and just be happy we have it and grow it that way. So again, it's at the lowest level of engagement, but it's okay, it's engagement. And then how do we slowly work you up the ladder? Whether it's an 8-year-old kid who's home watching, you know, cutting up videos of his favorite players or on his favorite team, hopefully the Mets, you know, that he turns around and then over time maybe uses that to bug his parents to take him to a game. And then maybe when he gets a little bit older, he's more of an engaged fan. He just walks himself up the ladder, so to speak. So this is another way of engaging it because that same 8-year-old may not sit down and watch our game. He may not watch a 3-hour game on television. But this will allow that fan, at any age, I'm just using 8 as an example, but allow that fan to be engaged with Major League Baseball. And then eventually we could use that with to grow the fan base higher and hopefully get more engagement of people in ballparks.
And to take that even further, so like now we're exposing, you can go and see what happened in, you know, 1955 or whatever, and kind of see that as you kind of explore the history of baseball. You know, a lot that's part of the talk of baseball is you're always thinking about, you know, plays that have happened in the past. Willie Mays the catch, for example, you can go see every single angle and it's, you know, right at your fingertips. So there's a lot of kind of falling into the content that we're hopeful that fans will do to explore the history for the, you know, the 8-year-old who's a Mets fan. Maybe he doesn't know about any of this stuff, and they can go and kind of see the legacy that's there.
So one other tie-in on this, as you guys were chatting, it reminded me, Greg, you said, you know, the more you engage with this, it kind of draws you in. It's sort of reminiscent of like the first time you ever explored video on YouTube. You know, you don't sit down intending to watch a half an hour of YouTube videos, but, you know, you look up and half an hour has gone by. The same thing happens specifically like in this context, but with baseball, with a baseball vocabulary. You know, so instead of searching for cat videos or whatever memes, you're searching for like, you know, double plays or particular pitch counts. We actually have analytics data that shows the more you engage with the content like this, it has a lifting effect on the overall baseball ecosystem. And I'll give you a specific example. Last year we did an exclusive game of the week with YouTube. This is part of the relationship that we've had with Google for a while now. And so one game every week wasn't available on your local sports network, and it wasn't available on ESPN or Fox or one of the national broadcasters. The only place you could go would be on YouTube. Normally what we see on YouTube throughout the season, we also have a highlights clips deal on YouTube, and we see a natural kind of decay. Like baseball has this kind of arc where every spring everybody thinks it's this year that their team is going to win the World Series. Like hope springs eternal, right? And then throughout the season, as teams start to fall off and fail in the standings or whatever, it's not as much fun to watch anymore, right? And so there's this natural decay, and we can quantify like exactly what that decay looks like. By adding a game of the week on YouTube on that platform, we actually saw engagement with the baseball content increase throughout the season instead. So that, it changed the sort of behavior, not on the primary live game content that was streaming every week, but just sort of reminding people like about baseball and about baseball being available on YouTube. The other content there, was more popular and there was more engagement. And that was before, this per clip highlight system. That was just standard highlights. So that's really encouraging.
I was going to say maybe it's also worthwhile talking about where we're heading. While there is this vocabulary and the system has mapped pretty much everything, what we're looking at is the same technology that we have for photo search that you see on Google. We're deploying that in a way that can identify as the vocabulary changes and people don't want to look at whether it's squirrels on the field, they now want to look at parakeets in the stands. If that hasn't been tracked.
I hate snakes. And we tag snakes, it turns out, in baseball games, and you can go out and search and see, and there's some really weird clips of like snakes sticking their head up in the outfield behind the outfielder, and the center field camera captures it. Some weird stuff. Yes, that
I
happened.
cannot wait to search for it. Hot dogs and snakes.
Yeah. Well, I think the other element too is now that we have this video in a state where we can consume it and utilize it, we can apply other technologies to then add more find more snakes, find more hot dogs, find other things that are out there that in the corpus of data that we have that's not just manually entered. And as we start seeing interest in what people are looking for, well, maybe we need to apply more tags to other videos that have that because we just haven't even found them yet, or just haven't gone through the work to do so yet. So that's going to be really interesting as we kind of grow that over time based on usage as well, which is exciting.
I mean, the way I think about it, and the challenge of sport is there is no script. It's the beauty. It is what makes sport so powerful. Where when you go on a platform like Netflix and you get multiple images, really merchandising that title to you, that's based on the script. They're based on all the metadata they have. And what we're doing today is we're structuring that in a way to deliver that similar type of experience, but in sport for the first time.
Yeah.
So since we are here at MIT Sloan, we teased the ML thing a little bit. Before we open up for questions, I wanted to just elaborate a little bit on this, and Greg, you can jump in as well. You mentioned at the beginning, we did some prep calls for this, and one of the things that we described was we feel like we're almost at the point where we've solved object tracking. And what we mean by that is we can track the ball and the players pretty reliably on the field. We track umpires, we track coaches, we track pitches, hits, throws, player movement. Instead of tracking center of mass on players, we're tracking multi-point skeletal models, 30 frames a second, and in some cases, 500 frames a second with high frame rate cameras. But all of that still falls under this umbrella of like object tracking, right? And one of the things that we're really excited about in, projecting forward for like the next 5 years is what happens when you start to connect objects in the game into systems of objects that are interacting with each other. Baseball plays. Like, what if we could train like a deep neural network to understand how to recognize a double play and how to quantify a double play, or even how to recognize the double play and then do the play-by-play, scoring or announcing, with an automated voice. So many of these functions are still done manually with literally human operators in the press box, like writing down on a piece of paper or on a laptop, such and such a pitch was thrown and then this happened and this is what happened on the field. And we mash up that like manual scoring data with the automated tracking data. But what if the whole thing was automated? What kind of insights would we find, about the game, in models like that? There may be new ways of evaluating defensive performance. Like how do players move on the field? Is their line to a ball as efficient as possible? Is their limb movement, a part of what makes them a great shortstop, for example? Bat path tracking, pitcher mechanics. These are some like cutting edge areas of machine learning and machine vision research, that we're excited to be partnered with Google on right now.
Go ahead. I was going to bring up the Google example, but go ahead.
One of the reasons we chose Google is because not only does Google have like really massively scaled systems that have been deployed for their own products, but they've also seen this wave of like AI, ML innovation coming and have hired, at least 50%, of the top researchers in the industry. And when we start talking about like systems of objects in video, these are cutting edge video research topics, and so we're excited about not just the fundamentals and continuity with our existing StatCast platform, but where will research go when you can combine the talent and the scale of Google with the data set that we have in baseball, and hopefully some really cool stuff will come out of this.
Okay, I was going to just add that it's called reference modeling, and actually our brain team based in Zurich, they've been focused on this for quite some time now, and they did a blog post recently on looking at data around European football or what we call soccer, and really being able to predict and continuous movement where the players are going to go. Now, these are teams, and this is the great fun of working at Google, that literally when I spoke to the research scientist who was working on this, he said to me in 10 years, he'd gotten the video from Manchester City, and in 10 years at working at Google, this was the first time he ever talked to anybody outside of Google about data. And so the reason they're doing this research is that eventually will show up in your search results. It will be the thing that enables Waymo and self-driving cars to do a left-hand turn into oncoming traffic. And then we're working on, how do we deploy this in the sports? And that, that ability to really almost predict the game before the game happens, we think it can be extremely powerful.
Right, and then one other element to take what Jason said further, remember we have all the video, we have all of this tracking data, we have all the traditional scoring, but we also have things like closed captioning for like what the announcers are actually saying as an annotation, both positive and negative for every play, home and away broadcast, as it were. So we can then start building an actual script of what an individual announcer would say, and then based on the tracking data to say, highlight what he's highlighted historically that maybe he didn't see in this play. So it actually will just make the on-air talent actually perform better, but by just being alerted of things that happened that maybe they saw or did not see, to kind of extend that out.
And by listening to the tone of the voice, you get the sentiment of what's also happening.
Precisely, like all these different elements tie into it. And then, and that could even include things like anecdotes that are said in between pitches about like what you might transition, how you've transitioned in the past as well. It's just to kind of increase the engagement, to make sure that it's an entertainment product along the way.
And with what was going on this week at spring training with the players being mic'd, it's also just another data flow that can come in to give somebody what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Very quickly, you realize that everything that's going on in the field is data.
I'm blown away. That's all very exciting. I know it's all aspirational, but with everything you're talking about in terms of getting to that level of advanced machine learning, what are we looking at? Like, how long until we get there?
So literally, we're starting now. So over the course of this off season, we spent a lot of time sort of getting the foundation in place, getting the fundamentals, putting all of our data, on one platform, training the team. One of the benefits of being single cloud versus multi-cloud is we can go a lot deeper, into the tech stack and, understand how AutoML and TensorFlow are going to work in our environment. But the next step is building on top of that, building new products and innovating. So the video highlights, we call the project Fastball internally, maybe rebranded before it's officially launched. But that is like the first example of something, that we're building on this new platform that we couldn't have done in the past. The more advanced machine learning stuff, like we're building models, we're training models now, and seeing how close we are to the cutting edge of research, I think. A lot of sort of machine vision right now is focused on still images, and video, is an advanced topic. So taking that and adding a time dimension is something new, but we can't wait to work with this team. And it's about sort of getting through the start of the season, getting to stability. We do a lot of work in the off season, on all these major infrastructure projects, and then we don't want to change that stuff during the season. So during the season is actually a good time for us to come back and do some long-term investment in like research into more advanced analysis like this. So stay tuned over the next few years for sure. Within 2 to 5 years, I think you're going to see major innovation based on machine learning.
And I would just add, since we are at Sloan, the beauty of working with somebody like Google Cloud is these investments that the MLB is making. They don't have to go out and build a building. They don't have to go out and buy their own servers. Basically they can spin up these servers as they're needed. They can test. Let's say they do something, doesn't work, it doesn't get the experience that they're looking for. They haven't built a server farm, and this is, I think for media and consumption, it's pretty revolutionary. I've launched lots of TV channels in my life, and you always started with like, how much does a satellite transponder cost? and what's the benefit, and you had to map out really the entire experience for 3 years from day one here with the capabilities, and the sandbox that really Greg and Jason have. You can test, you can try, and change on the fly if need be.
So we're going to transition to questions in a second, but before we do, the next generation of fans, I think it may have even been in the title or the description of this panel, we've talked about this very savvy 8-year-old who is doing all kinds of searching. But then also the people who are watching on YouTube. How much do we know about the demographics, what you're going for, and how this will directly affect essentially that target young one?
Yeah. So with the help of these gentlemen here, we know a lot about these people, more so than we have in the past. And it's one of the things that really excites us from a team perspective, from a marketing perspective, because right now, when we look at our TV ratings, as inaccurate or accurate as they may or may not be, we know that the average fan who watches on television, I could just talk about the Mets, is a 55-plus-year-old white male. Right? And when you look at the younger demographics, there's almost very limited younger children or tweens watching a game on baseball on television. But when we look at the YouTube numbers and we start to see all of this opportunity here with slicing and dicing videos, it's for the team's perspective, we have to get away from what's traditionally been our marching orders and how we've run our businesses to say, okay, we're going to watch the games on TV, or back when I was younger, you listened on radio, you watched on TV. That doesn't exist for the younger audience. So to have the ability to use this to transform our business and go ahead is crucial for us. But then it's how do we take this and also make that applicable in ballpark, right? This is great out of ballpark. So again, that'll probably be the last piece. What actually happens in park can take a little bit longer, but we're using AI and machine learning on multiple things here at the Mets. We actually did a rollout of something. We were the first team last year to go with a cashierless alcohol transaction. So we actually had a concession stand where we just had someone watching in security. You would go up and you would get your favorite Coors Light or whatever the product was. And it was a partnership with Mass Gin and Aramark and Clear. If you're familiar with Clear, when you're at the airport, the biometrics company. So you would take your beer, you would put it on the Mass Gin unit, and it would know exactly what that product is and what the cost is. And then you would use your biometrics through Clear to identify that you're over 21 and they charged your credit card because that's what you have tied to your Clear account. All in a matter of seconds. No human interaction needed. And that's what, from our feedback from a lot of the surveying that we do, more and more people want frictionless, transactions. So if you could do that, and the feedback on it was amazing. So that's just one thing that we're trying to do on top of, augmented and mixed reality in ballpark to keep a younger fan engaged. I mean, there's a lot of things we have to do, but this is coming at us really quickly, and we're excited to try to figure out a way to make it work.
Robot umps, robot bartenders,
Yeah,
all kinds of things happening. All right, let's see what we have in here. When thinking about tech innovations in baseball, how do you consider the impact on players and teams who have developed skills based on the current system? For example, removing pitch framing as a skill.
Yeah, so we certainly have seen a trend in, so exit velocity, launch angle are humongous across the league, and I think everybody kind of knew it, and it was kind of obvious. But what we've actually seen is an increase in launch angle by 1 degree per year going back to 2015. It's kind of amazing to think about that the whole industry has kind of switched and embraced, and now players are training their swing specifically to induce an outcome based on the data that they now have that they never had prior to the system, and so that's changing that. In the case of catcher framing, obviously that's, every sport's kind of dealing with the, this transition into tracking and, HD video and, slow, high frame rate video to kind of understand how the game has changed, how it's actually called versus what the rule book is. And catcher framing is a great example of that. It's a skill that now has been attributed to the catcher because of, the umpires being, though they're very good, those still, can be inaccurate in certain cases based on their ability to make that movement. But I think as we kind of address that and kind of understand it doesn't make sense that is a skill other than you're gaming kind of the system. You're kind of working around the edges of the rules to induce an outcome that you want. So like I said, every sport is dealing with this now, and I think as over time, that skill there'll be new skills that will come up that are based on what you're actually doing rather than what you're able to.
The truth is, catcher framing is essentially exploiting a loophole, between the rule book and the accuracy of the umpire's ability to call the play and the perception of, catching the ball and moving the glove. I think what we're seeing for the most part, this is a general statement, but I think it's backed by data. Players have embraced the availability of better, more accurate data. These are world-class athletes, and if you give them, solid data, they incorporate it extremely quickly, to improve their own performance. Almost all players and clubs go out and do direct relationships with high frame rate camera vendors or biomechanics like analysis for bat path and pitcher mechanics on their own, in addition to what we do at the league level, which is primarily for entertainment purposes. I mean, there's a number of different use cases that we're using, but we're primarily focused on providing a great experience to the fans, and supporting the game in that way. In terms of player development and training, that's really up to the clubs and the coaching staff, to make those investments. And I think, the trends in the industry are the return on the investment is so strong that people want the best data that they can get.
So you spoke a little bit about this, but more specifically, what are MLB's plans for introducing the vast amounts of data to fans? While many are comfortable with data, how do you plan to roll out the new functionality without overwhelming everybody?
It's been a little while since we've had a chance to refresh our core consumer apps, MLB.com, Club.com sites, the MLB app, the Ballpark app. I was talking to somebody recently, and they were like, over the past few years, MLB's been kind of quiet in terms of product innovation, and hopefully some of the stuff that we talked about today, explains why. We had some refactoring and some housekeeping and some consolidation. We had to pay down some technical debt, coming out of that Disney transaction. But it was also a huge opportunity for us to retool and refresh our core infrastructure. We're completing that process essentially now with the start of the 2020 season. And so we've also just rebuilt an entirely new product leadership team at MLB who's thinking about the fan experience and thinking about metrics and analytics and things like that. So stay tuned. The Fastball VOD product is one of the first innovations there, but there's a pipeline that we're developing where I think we're going to end up refreshing, a lot of those customer surfaces.
Okay. Lou, I think you might be able to answer this one.
I hope so.
All right. You've spoken about how you're using data to augment the existing fan experience. How are you planning to use data to attract new fans?
So that's a great question, whoever asked that. Hopefully it's not one of the guys who used to work for us or are in the audience here. So look, that's probably the biggest upside for us. We know that we're going to have data on our current fans. We have to be able to be a little bit smarter on how do we use data to go out and generate new fans. I mean, look, there's a lot of capacity in baseball. We have, over 3 million plus tickets we need to sell every year, and the average fan comes to about 3 games or less. So you're talking about trying to get 1 million people in your park 3 times. The easiest way to grow your attendance is to get the person who came to 3 games to come to 4 games. Just get them to come to an additional game. But that can only get you so far. So you have to be able to use this data and these tools to go out there and actively market towards, so they can help us do lookalike campaigns. So we can take this data and say, we know that Jason looks like this. He is a fan that scores as an X in our system. Let's find some lookalikes like that person. Then you have to work with partners like Google and others. How do we find that person? What's their trigger? What's the offer? And it's just a series of continual learning and testing. And I used to tell my teams all the time, test as much as we want, and we'll learn. I don't care if something fails. It's all right. Because if we learn something from it, great. Let's process that and move the other direction. But for us, there's so much world of opportunity out there with new fans as well. It's just a matter of how can you effectively market to them and reach them with the right offer.
The strongest indicator for whether somebody becomes a lifelong baseball fan and attends baseball games, eventually becomes a season ticket holder, which is kind of the top of the customer lifetime value progression, is whether they play baseball as a kid. And so you can think about amateur and youth baseball, as like the front of like an onboarding ramp. Imagine if you could do a simple, democratized, like augmented reality experience where you could get launch angle and exit velocity or pitch speed on your phone. you know, like just by pointing the camera on your phone, you know, at a Little League game. Wouldn't that make it fun, you know, to watch that game?
That would be something.
And Google has a long history of doing this type of thing, you know, with all of its products. I mean, I think 8 or more 10 billion user products. It'd be really cool to work together on, you know, an app that brought that kind of an experience to Little League.
It's fun. How do you protect fan privacy while using these new tools and continuing to personalize the fan experience?
So can you repeat the question?
How do you protect fan privacy?
So we anonymize all of our fan data. We don't track personally identifiable information or payment information or contact information or things like that. We look at patterns of the data in the aggregate, you know, for much of our analysis. Obviously, there are some situations where we do want to be able to reach out to individual customers, you know, and contact them with offers and promotions and things like that. So we have that data in our database. We've also taken the global movement toward customer privacy and control over your data very seriously. So like the European GDPR regulations we implemented, I think, ahead of schedule. And part of that is the right to be forgotten. So you can go to our website and ask us to basically delete all of the data that we have about you, and we will do that. We will forget that you ever, you know, interacted with us. And if you come back and sign up again, we treat you as a new customer at that point.
Okay. I think we can probably sneak in one more here. What other industries are using this technology of object and people tracking? Have Google Cloud MLB been reached out to about this to apply it to other concepts or professions?
Sure. I mean, obviously, moving balls, moving people, sports is a really exciting one. We do it for a host of industries, everything from retail, you know, finding where nails are at Home Depot. I'm trying to think.
Ooh, that would be nice.
You know, machine learning, we have as I said, we have a partnership with the NCAA. We also work with NASA. It's being used in healthcare. You know, the possibilities are really endless.
Wonderful. This was so fun. Thank you all for doing it. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.